been a minute since I've done one of these just like off the cuff, I don't know, lessons, basically like taking through it topic. And topic I want to talk about that a lot of people talk about, ask me about, and that I want to address and get my thoughts together on, is root work and fundamentals of root work, just in the sense of like what the heck you're doing and what you're trying to accomplish and how that all comes about. I think there's like, how does it work? You guys know I like to get into the theory of things, right? I like to understand the mechanisms of things, so then I can play with it and maybe get a different insight into how some other people might be doing something. So I like to talk about how it works. So what I'm thinking of here specifically is like, what's the root actually doing? Why is some part of a plant involved in your working, whether it's ritual working or spell working or whatever, right? How does it do something? Is it acting on your behalf, or is it giving you some powers, or is it? And so this starts to be some of what we think about. This on the metaphysics again. We talk about metaphysics, right? So this is some of the metaphysics of root work, right? So, and we have some people tuning in. Very cool. So when we talk about what exactly we're trying to accomplish, right? We're trying to somehow use this plant to affect a result. How is that happening? Well, we can take it a few different ways, right? And if we go through the different theories through the ages, there's a few different approaches. The first is that a plant has a spirit, just as a person has a spirit. And we've talked about spirit a lot, what spirit means and things of that nature. But in the context, I like to draw on this one of some traditions that really extract a lot from plants. So in the context of like Ayurveda, the plant's spirit, right, is like its formula almost. And we see this a lot in European tree traditions, anywhere in the world really. Trees kind of can be broken down as like a mathematical formula, and indeed anyone who messes around with higher math and does like fractals and stuff like that knows that you can make a tree. A tree is just a fractal. So every plant has a formula, right? And we see it in terms of the shape, sure, but that's happening on a chemical level in that plant. That's happening on the entire sort of rhythm of the plant. Everything that plant does is based in this formula, so to speak, and it fits in with these various formulas that make up the world, right? The universe, indeed. So we understand that to some extent as the plant's spirit. And again, in Ayurveda, that this plant has an algorithm, you might call it. Like, it's just this plant has these parameters to it, right? So in Ayurveda, they say when you extract a plant, and we've talked about this a little bit before, when you extract a plant, like they do it in ghee, so butter, that's a fat extraction, so it extracts like the fat-soluble components, or you do it in water, which is the opposite, right? It takes the aqueous components out, the water-soluble components. When you do that kind of extraction, they say the spirit leaves the plant. What does that mean? Well, when you do those extractions, they're partial, they're not complete, they don't replicate that algorithm, that formula, those sets of constituents that plant has. And so when we do that, we break that. We don't have the spirit anymore. We have a version of it. Now, why we do that is to emphasize one part of a plant versus another. The classic example is in cannabis, right? Like, if you want to get really high, cook some weed and some butter, that works. But if you want to have a healthy child, boil some weed in some water. It won't take out any of the psychoactive components into the water. Those will all remain in the herb, and just the beneficial terpenes will come in. And that's a good segue to talk about terpenes, aromatics, and things like that. As you guys know, cannabis is my go-to because I think a lot of people understand it intuitively, experientially, if you will. So when you smoke herb, right, it has THC, it has CBD, it has CBN, it has all these other things that are major buzzwords right now. And what those things do is they open and close doors, basically, in your body. Not mechanically, this is a metaphor, but they open and close sort of uptake. But what gets uptaken through there are terpenes and flavonoids and aromatics, okay? So the things you smell and the things you taste. And those are the things that affect how you feel when you smoke that herb. How can I prove this really easily? Get some herb that makes you really sleepy, okay? put it in a bong. I don't care if you usually smoke out of a bong. And put some lavender essential oil in that bong water. And if you're doing sleepy herb, put lemon essential oil in that bong water. And you'll find that it's quite bracing and stimulating all of a sudden, because the terpenes from the lemon are going to overpower the terpenes in the herb, and you're going to get that effect primarily. Vice versa, if you have herb that's racy, put lavender essential oil in your bong water, flips it the other way. And that just shows you, like, what you're feeling, what you're experiencing is not the THC, CBD, all that stuff. What you're feeling and experiencing is the terpenes. So, why am I talking about cannabis if we're talking about root work? Because cannabis is a weird master plant that produces a wider range of terpenes than almost every other plant. That's why it, can smell like a skunk or a tennis ball or fucking grapes or whatever, right? But the chemicals, the terpenes themselves, are the exact fucking same. They're the exact same chemical that is in a grape or in actual lavender blossom or an apple tree or what have you, right? So now we're starting to get into root work, because we already know from smoking herb that on a psychophysical level we can be deeply affected as human beings by these aromatic compounds in plants, okay? So then take it to the next level. These aromatic compounds, as we've proven with the essential oil experiment, if you want to go ahead and do that one at home, these aromatic compounds are found in all plants. Different variations of them, but they're the same class of compounds, okay? Now let's talk about what the sense of smell and taste really fucking are, because this all comes into it. My root work is based on smell, right? If the smell of the combination has to fit the situation. But let me go on further with this, right? So what your sense of smell is, and I've talked about this in other videos, what your sense of smell is a chemical detection system. What do I mean by that? You can only detect chemicals, different chemicals, and different smells are just different chemicals with your sense of smell. That's all it detects, and that is its purpose, right? Your sense of smell was evolved in the wild to be able to sniff something and say, this will probably kill me, I shouldn't eat it, or sniff it and say, this smells good, I should eat this. And what smells good to you is stuff that will sustain you. Like, that is hardwired into your body. So the things that smell good to you that you want to eat are generally good for you. Now, we have food chemistry and shit, and they kind of hack that, right? But fundamentally, like, shit smells gross. You don't want to eat shit. It's poisonous. That's what your sense of smell is for. And indeed, a trained sense of smell in a fucking chemistry laboratory can perform what's called olfactory spectroscopy. What does that mean? That means they can smell a chemical solution and then say the constituents of it and their relative ratios without using any equipment other than a trained nose, and that's totally valid in the world of laboratory chemistry, because that's how fucking good your nose is, and that's how precise it is. More precise, in fact, than some other forms of analysis of chemicals. So, when you know that all these different smells, and if you missed this part, go back to the earlier part of the video, all these different smells can affect your mind, your whole makeup, really, your entire body. And when I'm talking about this, linalool is one of these compounds. Linalool is a very common compound. It's found in lavender. I believe it's in cinnamon to some extent. It's in a lot of plants, okay? Linalool, when you smell it, causes something like 8,000 different simultaneous reactions in your body. They're minute, but it does it. And when all smell is you interacting with a chemical, because that's what we know smell is. So then this chemical has that power, okay? So now, when we're talking about root work, we're talking about using these chemicals, these powers, because it's not about the chemicals, right? What is a chemical? Let's stop and say that, okay? What is a chemical? A chemical is a pattern of energy. Right, that's all it is. We all took some pre-chemistry in school. There's the little thing in the middle and the outside things that go around it. That's an atom, right? An atom is like of different elements. You combine different ones, that makes a chemical. So what is it? It's a pattern of energy, okay, that stays in a certain general tendency, and it interacts with other patterns of energy. That's what chemicals are. And that's what your nose smells, and that's what plants have, and that's how root work works, okay? So that's just at a basic, very mechanical level. So knowing that, what do we do with it? Okay? Now we start to understand what we're doing with those roots. Because we have to know that much to understand how we work the root. So, when we are working roots, there's a process we go through, whether we're making a mojo hand, whether we're making an incense, whether we're making whatever. When we're working with plants, we're always going to do the same basic things, okay? We're going to have to wake the root up one way or the other. We're going to make an offering to the root and make it deal with it. And we're going to kind of command it specifically what to do. Now, how is this all working? How are you interacting with these levels of energy? I mean, that's how we work, right? That's everything conjuration is. You have to be able to put that energy of your intentions into your hands and into your words and to project it into the chemical makeup of that plant at that time. Anyway, back to the technicals, right? So we're going to wake the root up. What does that mean? Well, when a plant's in the ground, it's alive, right? It's got energy flowing through it, bioelectric energy. It's doing its thing. It's photosynthesizing as well. It's living, okay? So it's perpetuating, it's continuing to make that pattern, we said, that defines that plant, right? The spirit of the plant is that pattern, right? So it's continuing to make this, right? We harvest that plant, and we harvest it the right way, and then it sort of just puts it on hold, right? It freezes it. So you have to kick energy back into it to kick it back up, okay? So this is where we wake it up. And usually we'll wake it up with energy, with heat or sound energy, right? What does that mean? Hold it over a candle, talk to it, yell at it, depends what you're trying to wake up. Rub your hands usually. You see I'm doing it unconsciously, but now I'm noticing it. You rub your hands before you hold the root. You want to get that heat energy from that friction going. So you got to give some of that back. You got to wake that root up, okay? Then usually you'll blow smoke on the root from a cigar to just bless it, right? To give it, and additionally, remember, tobacco is something we use for commanding, to ground and command. So now we're taking the initiative, the command in the situation. Then usually you'll speak to it, invoke it. And again, let's go back to that same model where we're talking about this is a pattern of energy. You're putting your energy into this pattern, and that's shifting it, influencing it. Is it changing the chemicals in it? No, unlikely. But maybe it's affecting what they call chirality, which is the way the chemicals spin. And that's a whole other thing. I want to talk a little more, though, about when we're working with these spirits of the plants, what we're doing. You see, when you take a root and you make what we call a root, right? That's like archangel root, like so angelica root with like red string, or even like a hajan, right? Hajan root, anything like that, and you're wrapping it in red cord, and you're blessing it, and you're tying knots, applying oils and things like that. You're making a root, or you're making a root to bury in someone's yard. Whatever, you're making a root. You're sort of taking the energy, the spirit, the pattern of that plant. You're adding some things to augment it and constrain it, and you're setting it to a task. That's what that conjuration is, okay? When you're making a mojo hand, mojo bag, whatever, gree, when you're taking a really any container spell, because that's just another type of container spell if you ask me. Anytime you're taking a container and you're combining a few different plants, a few different roots, a few different elements, you're doing a couple things there. One, presuming you're not also conjuring a spirit into that jar, which is a whole different level of working, then you're creating essentially a synthetic foundation for spirit. You're setting up a vibration from all these different energies that's just in that container, okay? And then in every instance where you're doing this kind of work, you're giving it the breath of life. And when you give it the breath of life, you're giving it your essence your life. And so you're taking a component of yourself and putting it under the strong influence of all those different roots that are in there and different constituents and components. And that's why before you do that, and you'll see I segued way far off from what we were talking about, but that's why before you do anything like that and give your life essence to another root or to anything else, you're going to go through the process first of waking the root up, blowing smoke on the root through the cigar, commanding the root, conjuring with the root, making your deal with that root before you're going to give it control over you to just do what it will. You have to constrain it, okay? That's the core theory of root work. You can go into why different plants are for different things and things like that. That matters too, because that gets back to what we were talking about before as chemicals, right? Like what tastes sweet to us or smells sweet to us is chemically, on a chemical level, and therefore on an energetic level, and therefore, going back to this concept of the spirit of a plant, very different than a sour smell or a taste or something like this. So when we're picking the roots for something, like I said before, I kind of just gauge out a situation. If I'm working a job, I know what's for what. But a lot of things are for a lot of things. You can use, well, for influence, a classic one is, what are you going to use for influence, right? You could use clove, or you could use, catnip if you're doing a woman, or if you're working for a woman, or you can use calamus root, or you can use licorice root. So to me, these have some similarities. There's a sweetness to all of them, but their essential properties are really, really, really different. So what I'm looking for is, what am I combining it with? How does it smell to me? It's really very, it really always comes back to that, because that's the signature. That's another way to talk about the spirit of a plant. The signature of that plant is that plant spirit. So these are some things that I think about when I'm doing root work and when I'm considering my roots. And when you think along these lines, right, along the lines of the smell, along the lines of the concentration in that regard, of these chemicals, of these compounds, of these energies in that plant, that goes into how I select my roots too, whether I get them fresh or whether I get them dried. Another thing to think about is that old school workers wouldn't just dry a root. We get today, like, you buy a Queen Elizabeth root or orris root, and we get these slices of orris root nowadays. They need to do that to help it dry. But traditionally, a worker wouldn't do that. Traditionally, a worker would smoke the root. What do I mean by that? They'd harvest the root fresh, the root of the plant, archangel root, whatever, and they would smoke it, just like you smoke chicken wings or whatever, to dry it. And the herbs that they use to smoke it would be that first step, you see, of influencing that root, so that when you got into the exchange with it, your spirit would sort of be protected and in control. And that goes again to why we blow the cigar on it. That's not this. It doesn't function the same to dry the root, but at the same time, it's very much on that level influencing the root. Okay. So these are some of the basic things that I think about when I'm coming into even talking about root work. Because there's, wort cunning, right? Plant magic. And then there's root work specifically as a discipline. And this is sort of what makes root work stand out to me. Of course, also that root work is primarily concerned with the root body, not the aerials of plants. Yeah, of course we use the aerials, leaves and stems and all this. But it's called root work, not plant work, okay? And we use a lot of roots. And the aromatics, the energies of these roots are very different, right? Like if you think of, like Lil Jon to chew, galangal root, or High John. These are weird kind of smells, right? What does that mean, that it's a weird smell? Go back before, right? What is your sense of smell? It's a chemical detector. It detects patterns of energy. So what does that mean about these roots? If they're weird smells, that's a unique signature of energy that you're able to access through that root. And that's why we're interested in these roots. Okay? So I encourage you to start thinking along these paradigms in terms of your sense of smell, how your sense of smell is an energy detector, straight up. in life in general and in root work. Okay? Train that thing, and it'll be critical to you. And I encourage you in your root work to really, really, really consider the relationship you have with the energy of that root. How active it is when you're working with it, how awake it is, right? How you're interacting with it, and what your relative position to it is. Okay, there's an aspect of, it's not strategy, it's not conflict necessarily, but there's a relationship with it. So what's your relationship with, not that plant species, that root that you're holding in your hand that you're going to work? What's your relationship with that one? And consider that. That's very important, and that's important when you buy a root, right? Like when you buy a mojo hand or something like this, right? Like your relationship with the roots in that bag, that's why you keep it in your underwear or under your armpit. That's so it can get your energy, because your smell is your energy signature. You see? It's the same. Okay, you're giving off all these smell compounds, even ones you can't smell that are outside of your smell range that animals can smell. That's your energy signature. That's your spirit coming through on that wavelength. So same as the plant. So you exchange that. You make that relationship when you wear, you know what I mean? That's why they say at first, for the first 2 weeks or 2 months or whatever, different workers say different things, but that at first you keep that right close to your body. Then it's okay. You keep it in your purse, keep it in your whatever, but you got to make that bond. So that's as the recipient of something who didn't create it. When you're the creator and you're going to give it your breath of life, you're going to breathe that to that root. You make that relationship first, and you make sure that it knows its job. Otherwise, these roots can do a lot. Okay, they have unique energies, right? Unique energetic patterns to them, but they have wide ranges of capabilities. You even see this in, like, you look at books, right? And they'll talk about, oh, this is for this and this and this, right? This is for protection and luck and whatever, right? So you gotta dial it in. You can't just let it go buck wild, or it's just gonna perpetuate its thing. You gotta attune it to your pattern, okay? So these are some of the things that I definitely encourage everyone to think about in root work. A lot of these basic principles carry over to bone work. Incorporating bones. There's some more details to bone work. We're going to talk about that in a separate lesson. But, yeah, when you're working bones, very much the same paradigms. Okay, there's, again, additional things because different parts, and this is actually true of the root work too. We might as well talk about this. It's a lot why we use the roots too. The different parts of the plants have different functions. They have different constituents. We go back to that analysis of the plant, of root work, right? Where the smells and the different components and constituents of the plant affect its abilities, if you will, or the wavelengths it operates on. Well, then the leaves and the leaves smell different from the flowers, smell different from the root, because they have different stuff in them. Therefore, they're functioning on these different energetic levels. When it comes to animals, it gets a lot more into the physical, right? Like a hand grabs, a mouth eats, etc. So we'll talk about that again in a separate one. Anyway, it's just good to give you guys an impromptu lesson. This is something that I've been wanting to talk about for a minute. On the going out stuff, I am booked solid. Don't hit me up for a booking until June. That said, classes at Ritual Craft are all on. Beginning in, I think on like April Fool's Day, I have my first class. Beginning first week of April. If you want to come to Denver, live classes at Ritual Craft, those are going to be dope. And the best ones, hopefully, will make it onto video lessons on Ritual Craft School online. If you're not already following them, check them out. It's Ritual, CRAVT. They're a fantastic store here in Denver. They're expanding. They got classes coming, like a whole classroom. Very cool. And I'm very, very, very honored and psyched to be teaching with them and at that place. And it's going to be dope. But because of that, I'm booked solid. Don't hit me up for work. Don't hit me up for readings. I ain't got shit happening outside of what I'm focused on right now. I do want to tell you guys all the story about when me and Witch Dr. Alex and Crossroad King went out to California to do some exorcisms, but now is not the time, and I should probably tell it with them. And there's only so much we can tell, because some shit was really beyond description, right? Like, some shit was really profound. I've never done anything like that before. That was interesting work. It's why I've been so quiet recently, because I've had to recover, I think, from the overall drain. I'm feeling back in the mix, but like I said, I got all these classes coming up. So what you'll see is less of me doing readings, less of me offering workings for anyone, more me doing these to practice for my classes, though. So win-win, I think. Anyway, guys, this is all going on Patreon. And I got a major, like, backlog upload of Patreon, like 4 or 5 videos that are uploading in the background right now. So Patreon's back in the mix. I'm sorry I fell off. It's been a crazy couple months for me. As I imagine for many people watching, right? Like, this whole South Node thing that's happening right now is nuts for everybody I know. Hang on tight, guys. We're re-picking up some old patterns and beneficial old lines. You know, my dear astrologer friends have been telling me that we've had 8 years clearing karma, and now we're about to make this leap into potentially, at least in my case as a Virgo who's going through a, you know, once in 500 fucking year type alignment in my 4th house, clearing many generations of karma. So hopefully the best to all of you. Hang in there. We're in Aries season now, so shit should start moving for us. That Pisces season was rough for me. I imagine for some of you guys too. And yeah, I'm psyched to be doing video lessons again. Keep an eye out. Again, the Patreon link's in the profile. The link to Ritual Craft School is also there if you want to check them out. And yeah, guys, I'll talk to you soon.